we'll make everybody jealous. I'm like, I have freshly brewed coffee. Hello, everybody.
Okay, we are live. Hello from the dark Ozarks, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
And I'm jealous because Josh has escaped his house.
Yes, I have, and it's a wonderful feeling. On the courtyard at Vintage Paris with my freshly brewed Americano, and not just any Americano. This is a quad shot Americano.
Oh, good. It'll get you through our topic.
Absolutely, but we have cool this is a fun topic. We were chatting about this this morning, and I think it's really is something that you and I both in our respective lines of work have dealt with a lot, which is the urban legend aspect of things. Sometimes, which when you dig into them is really, really interesting, and it just leads to more and more. And sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. And sometimes the legend is true. That's the scary thing.
Oh, so true. So true. And I'm curious because we have obviously we chatted about the bullet points, but we have not actually, like, you and I have not specifically talked about this. Yeah. There are some of these legends that you dig into, and to me, they're what's the best way to say it? It's like when you're first exposed to the concept of folklore, and you could be exposed to it as a teenager, you could be exposed to it as a transplant, and it seems like you're almost inundated with, oh, there's these really cool things, but the more you dig into them, sometimes the more shallow or non-existent that it actually turns out to be. And that with that approach or with that concept, then for myself as editor-in-chief of State of the Ozarks, and working on, and people fairly rapidly come to realize that I work on stories like this, then I get inundated with sort of like the top 10, and I kind of like, there's a part of me that's like, oh, thank you so much for saying that. Not gonna pursue that one any further because I know there's not necessarily a whole lot there. But thanks for sharing. And then in other cases, it does come to some very surprising conclusions, and you find out, oh my goodness, there really is a lot there. Is that similar to some of your experiences?
I think so. I mean, sometimes urban legend certainly is more dramatic than the reality. And that's what gives them traction. And sometimes some of them you just really wonder how it ever came about to begin with. And then some of them, I just, politely say, okay, and go on. And something we were discussing before we went on here, I do apologize to people because I wanted to hit something out of Arkansas, but most of the quote urban legends in Arkansas are, really fall into a different category or were true.
So if you are from Arkansas and you're listening, please send us your urban legends. We would like to hear them.
Yes. I mean, there's a fantastic one, the Dog Boy Equipment, Arkansas, but unfortunately it is a true story. It's a rather creepy, true life story, but it's not an urban legend. And that maybe for another day, but we kind of had this as urban legends A to Z, and we did that for a reason other than obviously the bookends, because two of the biggest, of course, are Albino Farm and Zombie Road.
Oh my gosh. So let's start with Albino Farm. Tell me your experience and what's true, what's not true, and what is the legend?
Okay, well, I mean, the legend really goes back. I mean, it's an area outside of Springfield, Missouri. It's been known as the Sheedy Farm, Springlong Farm, Headley Farm. The Shees owned it from 1923 until about 1980. And that's when it became, the legend grew up, was around World War II shortly after.
Mhm.
And there's not really a whole lot as to why it started, other than the Sheehys were a large family, large Irish family, 9 kids. And what they did is when the parents died, their will gave everything to all the kids. All 9 kids then had wills that, as each of them died, everything was given to the other siblings until the last sister died in about 1980. And so you had the same group of people out there for a very long time. But for some reason, albinos came into play. And I've never been even heard that, that there were albinos in the family or anything. But you had the scary caretaker version, which you get in a lot of urban legends. Supposedly, the family turned it over to a caretaker. It's always amazing to me how families just, oh, here's a farm, now just stay here. But
it's under
that he
the
was an albino.
it's under the Scooby-Doo. It's under the Scooby-Doo clause of handing your property over to things.
That's true. That's true. And some versions of that story were that he would chase trespassers off with a hatchet, but that really seems to kind of get crossed up with the Hatchet Man's Bridge legend in the Springfield area, and that's much older. I think it's sort of the Scooby-Doo factor. You get an albino, get a caretaker, and you throw in a hatchet, and
I
you're
almost
chasing kids
remember
off.
that episode.
Yeah, it's classic Scooby-Doo. Another version was, and this is around World War II, and I wonder if it's because there was a prisoner of war hospital in Springfield at Pythian Castle.
Mm-hmm.
That there were a bunch of albinos sequestered somehow on the farm. Again, no reason why would we sequester albinos to begin with, but that's the version. And then there is the ultimate Scooby-Doo version, albinos trapped on the farm by a mad scientist.
That's fair.
Okay.
That's fair.
Documentation, what really shows from records is they had to call the police out a lot to run people off. You had a lot of trespassers. They'd even try to start bonfires, things like that. And then the family, even after the last child died, and there were like nieces and nephews, they tried not to talk about it because it's just been, so many stories, they feel like the family's gone through enough.
Yeah.
So basically, you have all that. Some people say it's haunted. I've never really found anything to indicate anything like that. But really, it's a classic urban legend of, I'm not really sure where the idea of albinos came in, but it got traction and just blew up.
And I think something that is interesting, and just as a point counterpoint on this, a lot of times that you do see when you have especially private property that becomes associated with an urban legend outside of the owner's will, that it can, first of all, attract people who ultimately damage the property, and that in some cases may make living at the property untenable to the owners. And to me, this is the opposite of what a respectable investigation is about.
Exactly. And it really, just having lived in the Springfield area my college years and everything, it was just this big topic, hey, about the albino farm. And sometimes people didn't even really know where it was and that kind of thing. But it got this mystique, and I hate to say it, but it really had the characteristics of a Scooby-Doo episode.
Yeah.
I mean, that cliche, and there's no real reason for it. Sometimes, there's a grain that you understand why it got there. And that's, if we jump over the zombie road, that's kind of, it's a little different. Not a lot, but a little.
So where, and so for folks who don't know, where is the zombie road, or quote unquote zombie road?
Okay. Well, the zombie road is actually the Lawler Ford Road. It's just outside St. Louis. It's near, it's in a wooded area near Glencoe. And it actually runs into near a ford on the Merrimack River. It's about a 2-mile long passage through the forest, which I think is sort of one of the impetus of the urban legend, because you're out in the forest, there's this road, and it's creepy at night. And it was, Indians quarried flint there for hundreds of years. It was first settled in like 1803 by the Hamilton family. And then in the 1850s, it gets sold. And then the Pacific Railroad runs a spur through one end of the road. So you have a railroad there. Then there's tales of, here's sort of the impetus of a legend, is in the 1870s, there's a lady who she was the wife of a judge there in St. Louis, that she ended up being hit by a train and died there.
Okay.
But we really, it didn't get the name of Zombie Road until probably the 1990s, maybe the 1980s. And the idea was that zombie spirits of the railroad workers would rise up and walk the road and this kind of thing. And we do have, there is a tale of supposedly, the other version is Zombie was the nickname of an escaped mental patient who ran to the area from a nearby mental asylum. But there really is no mental asylum nearby. We don't know if, and why zombie? I don't know. It's kind of like albino. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sort of the other thing there is, during Prohibition, it was an area that you had some speakeasies, and gangsters, and there are tales that certain St. Louis gangsters kind of dumped bodies in the area, that kind of thing. And then later on, there's stories of supposedly people practicing the occult there, which you're in the middle of the woods. That's part of that. But the zombie is just kind of, I think it was a good name.
Yeah. And I think, in the case of some notable things that jump out to me from a socio, cultural standpoint. In the case of the Albino Farm, you're within close proximity of a large urban population, Springfield, and with also a large college population, and of course the St. Louis Metroplex, the same, only magnified. I think something that is interesting to me, and this is just me extrapolating based on our conversation right now, but there's very much a 1980s, 1990s horror vibe, pop culture horror vibe to the Zombie Road with St. Louis, with the St. Louis region, and I feel like the Albino Farm aspect, that the urban legend of that began perhaps 10 years earlier, if it does. And this is not being, actually not making a joke, even though I, do joke about this a lot, is really at the height of Scooby-Doo in pop culture. And there are those cross ties. So I think part of what I feel like is important that we bring to the table of Dark Ozarks is, again, our tagline, sometimes there are no easy answers, But sometimes the difficult answer is this was made up by college kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's, it's a good story, but it's just that. I mean, without much meat. I mean, and I can tell you from in my area, there's a couple examples that mirror that. One is Colebrook Farm, again a farm, which it's along a rural road outside Carthage, Missouri. Basically, what's left are a couple of chimneys, and it started out as a farm. It became a summer camp. Summer camps are always big in urban legends. We just have to look at the. We just have to look at Crystal Lake. So, and then later, it just kind of, it got sold, fell in disrepair. They tore the buildings down, but the chimneys are there. And in the last, say, 15 years, a legend has grown up that it's the Witch's Road. Supposedly, a witch lived there, and she cursed the land and things like that. And it's like, no. And that's a really new one. That's only been going around about 15, 20 years.
Yeah, that is new. And it's, and I think what is interesting is the counterpoint to that, right in your neck of the woods, is Spooklight Road, which is not an urban legend.
No. But, ironically, as we were talking this morning, the Spooklight is definitely some sort of natural phenomenon, and it's been, observed for hundreds of years. And to be honest, for a very long time, it was very much a tradition, a family tradition. You pile in the car and you went out and you looked for the Spooklight, and any given night, particularly a summer night, there might be 50, 60 cars out there. Once they paved the main road and there's no parking access right there, that's pretty much fallen away. And there's a lot of kids, I say kids, that say are at least 30, 35, that really didn't get that experience, and they think it's an urban legend.
Right. That is a very interesting counterpoint aspect to that culture.
Yeah, because I just thought that was a legend. You hear that. And there's another actually, or not far from Spooklight Road, is Hoffman Mansion, and it has an urban legend that grew up around it. Very similar. It was a family land from the Hoffman Quapaw family, one of the founding families of the Quapaw tribe. And Mr. Quapaw made a fortune in oil in Oklahoma, bought the land there, and raised his family. They had a very large family and had a number of children die of smallpox. There's a family cemetery there, and there's child graves. Over time, the main house burned, and there was a caretaker. There was a caretaker house there, and they did keep a caretaker on site. And so, urban legends grew up that it had been in the past a summer camp. Again, same themes. And that the caretaker had killed the children at the summer camp. And it's like, no, none of that happened, The family owned the land up until about a year ago. They sold it just recently, and someone's built a new house where the house was. And then it really kind of spurred up about 15 years ago again, because police found a burned out van sitting on the property that appeared to, with a body in it that appeared to be a drug deal gone bad. And so more legends came up that a caretaker had killed this guy and this kind of thing. So you have those recurring themes in these legends.
Well, and of course we've got, a number. One of the things that I find personally interesting, you can Google, haunted locations in Missouri and come up with a number of theaters or venue locations in Branson. And some of those I could speak on from things that people have said. Others I'm going, this is late 90s, early 2000s kids on the internet who are no longer kids. They would have been, people my age, going, what can we make up? I'm quite confident of it. Not saying that there's not paranormal activity in this area. And I think one of the things that is an interesting dichotomy, that it's oftentimes pushes things into an either or, is that the individuals who are quote unquote debunking some of these urban legends oftentimes are very dismissive of real paranormal activity. And sometimes people who are very much in favor of understanding paranormal activity simply take everything with no analysis whatsoever. And I think it's important to bring, first of all, a certain level of analysis and skepticism to any situation, but also an open mind.
Exactly. I mean, and to be honest, now, say Zombie Road, could there be paranormal activity there? And there's certainly been claims of it. With a lot of the events there, sure, you've got a number of murders that from gangsters. You've got the woman killed by the train and so forth. So there could be. So whether or not the urban legend is true is a separate issue in some cases. But sometimes they just get wound up and it gets blown up much bigger.
And one no, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say one of the things that, to me, and this may be different for each person, but to me, something that is a red flag, I'll find it interesting culturally, but that is a red flag, is when you get the same story told over and over, but in different locations. The children's handprints on the back of the car. I think the earlier version of that is the Indian princess who threw herself off of a cliff, and then haunts the site of her suicide. Of course, we have a location on Table Rock Lake called Virgin Bluff, and it has the resultant quote unquote, in this particular case, I really question whether or not it is an Indian legend, and would say it is probably white folks legend about Indians, non-existent Indians in many cases, because and not to be dismissive, and I think for people who follow us know that when we are dealing with real paranormal activity, when we are dealing with real folklore and legend, I'm not dismissive of it.
No,
but
me either.
I there's a point that I'm going, if that many Indian princesses were suicidal, throwing themselves off cliffs because their lover could not be with them, wow, that's a high suicide rate among Indian princesses.
And actually, I think I've read before that there's at least one of those locations with that legend in every state in the continental U.S.
Very fair. Very fair.
Yeah.
I think I know it's not his fault, but I'm just gonna blame Washington Irving.
There you go.
I'm gonna say at some point he wrote the legend. Or Longfellow, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. He wrote Hiawatha. So I'm going to pretend as though he wrote a fictional story about a fictional poem about a suicidal Indian princess. He didn't really, to my knowledge.
Well, I mean, I think, and why those legends are so prevalent, I think, is the same reason that people still show up to watch Romeo and Juliet.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. It pulls at the heartstrings. There's an emotional connection, and I think that from a cultural perspective, that especially as white settlers moved in and across North America, they were aware that there was a culture that had preceded them, and I think that poems, which honestly, two of my favorite poems of all time, is The Village Blacksmith and Hiawatha by Longfellow. And sometimes, his work, again, viewed through a modern lens, is critiqued for creating an overly romanticized or patronizing view of First Nation peoples. And while that does have a certain amount of accurate representation to it, you have to view it within its time. And
yes,
art has to be appreciated within the context that it was created. And in order to really understand it and to give it its due, it's important to look at it through a modern lens as well, absolutely. But you really got to look at it from the point that it was created. And from my perspective, and of course myself growing up in an area that I was aware that there had been Native American people on the land, traversing through the land that I grew up on. You wonder what was that like? Who were these people? And it's not difficult, especially as a child. My sister and I we didn't actually play cowboys and Indians. We played Indians. We pretended like we were foraging on a regular basis, and sometimes we really were. And it there's something elemental about connecting with this idea, and I think that's part of the Virgin Bluff, the plunging, the Indian princess plunging to her death. I think that speaks to it, and that culture is also, that settler culture is also valuable. These were real people as well.
Oh, I agree. And that is, I think there's some of this does come out of even, Zombie Road, for an instance, Hoffman Mansion, definitely. And that one is mixed up in settler culture and Indian culture because it was both.
Yes.
And Albino Farm to a degree too, and not understanding because that family stayed on the land and just didn't sell everything off, and it became a mystique.
Yeah.
And so not understanding that. We are getting close to 7:30. Is there anything that you want to throw out to wind up?
Let's talk about, I want to talk about my experience with the Billy Cook story, because I originally thought that was an urban legend.
Okay. And
I think it's particularly poignant because it's the reason that you and I ended up meeting to begin with 4 years ago. And of course, a big shout out to Curtis Copeland, who is a great historian, Ozarks historian. And he was the one back in September of 2016 who threw out this story and said, Josh, I really think State of the Ozarks should investigate Billy Cook. And I'm going, Billy who? Because, the regional aura is in the tri-state mining district, and I'm down here in the White River Hills. And the first thing that happened was I looked it up and went on, Googled it, and I found 3 articles. I found, and I looked over those 3 articles, and honestly, I went, well, shoot, this story's already been told. There's nothing that I could confirmedly add. Because clearly, look, there's 3 articles. And something that I've always strived to do with State of the Ozarks is bring new material to light. And I'm going, I don't want to rehash other people's work. I don't want to copy. I'm not going to copy and paste. And if there's not a lot to be dug into, if it's already been covered, then so be it. So I kind of broached that subject with Curtis, and Curtis responded by going, no, I think there's more to it. I think you need to look into it. And so we move forward, and the first thing that happened on that was going to Peace Cemetery, and it happened to be a day in October that we ran into each other for the first time.
Yep.
And that was the reason that's what brought us together in terms of working together on these projects. But then
Mhm.
as I continued to do research, interviewed interviewed Larry Campbell, and started finding first person or original source material documentation on the story, I realized something very interesting. And that is that the articles that I had looked at originally, that could easily have been written off as urban legend or have been written off because they feel a little urban legend-ish, could have been written off that I could have just dismissed and said this story's already been told. The thing that I came to realize was that one of the three articles was an original source article, but it had a lot of errors that an average internet searcher would have no way to verify that those errors were there. Now, if you interview real people and if you pull real books from real libraries and do a point-by-point comparison, you realize that there was a lot of errors. And
Mhm.
and then the two other articles were essentially copy and paste rehashes of the first article, and so they consequently copied over many of those historical inaccuracies. And that was very eye-opening to me as a journalist, as you compare, to see that these stories, of course, was it 59, 60 with Billy Cook?
1950.
Okay.
1950.
Okay. That these stories, um, even if it's past and it's history, that there's still a lot that we can bring to the table, whether, of course, through a series like this, like Dark Ozarks, or through, publishing new articles. We can bring a lot of new dialogue and at the very least bring accuracy.
Well, yeah, and I'm fortunate for being here and have written on Billy, and I do a lot of public events. I have firsthand accounts brought to me,
Yeah.
even as recently as months ago. 84-year-old man was at an event and told a firsthand account of running into Billy the night that Billy dumped the bodies of the Mosier family in the mining shaft, but he didn't realize it at the time. And then after the fact, realized that he came real close to being killed, probably.
Yeah.
Um,
Just chilling. It's absolutely chilling.
yeah, and even though, I mean, you stop and think, in a few months, we are going to be 70 years past the killing spree.
Wow.
But personal stories keep coming forward.
Yes. Yes. That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the flip side of that is, even here where Billy is so well known because he was from here, um, younger people often will say, "Oh, I thought Billy Cook was just an urban legend."
Right. The boogeyman that somebody told you about.
The boogeyman. Yes, they a lot of younger people think that Billy Cook really was the boogeyman that their parents made up to try to keep them from hitchhiking, etc.
And I think this would be a good point to wrap up on. But something that I think my research verifies, your research verifies. We might have a good time spooking ourselves out, especially as kids or young adults, telling these super gory pop culture stories. But if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, if you really want to take that step, the realities of Dark Ozarks is much more terrifying than the pop culture stories that are created just for the fun of it.
Oh, definitely. Urban legends are fun, but the reality is a lot darker and a lot more of a cautionary tale. And certainly
Yes,
Billy represents that. And he
very
did
much so.
become the reason. He really did become the reason that an entire nation stopped hitchhiking. We just
Yes,
don't know that it was Billy.
yes. It destroyed the faith of an entire
Yes,
society in one killing spree.
yes, it did. And that is something that we will be talking about in depth. So
Absolutely. I just want to ride a 1950s car, vintage 1950s car on old Route 66.
We can make that happen.
Okay, that's good. That's good. But we're not picking up any hitchhikers.
Oh shoot, no.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm gonna have
Okay.
to bid y'all adieu. But good times. Good Friday night, everybody.
Good times. Yes, and thank you for listening in. Let us know if you have topics you want us to cover, and we'll be back here Monday night.
Absolutely. And follow us here on Dark Ozarks on Facebook. Share with any of your friends around the world who are interested in the dark and the noir of Middle American history. And also check us out on Instagram at dark_Ozarks.
Yes. And have a good weekend, everyone.
See y'all.
Bye.